The first time I really felt my stomach drop was when I heard the name. Not a baby name, but the name of a controversy that just won't die. It began quietly, mere whispers in the corners of royal watching communities. But then Tom Bower's book topped the bestseller list and Lady Colin Campbell started speaking out on platforms followed by millions, and the questions were suddenly no longer whispers. They were cries. And the most shocking thing, the questions weren't about jewelry or titles or family feuds. They were about something far more basic. Something that, if true, would change everything we thought we knew about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's family. The people behind this story are what makes it unlike any of the other royal controversies. Tom Bower had not begun his career writing about the royal family. Over decades, he built a reputation as one of Britain's most serious investigative biographers. He's written about powerful media moguls, politicians and business figures, people with huge resources and every motivation to resist uncomfortable scrutiny. That's how he's always operated. Just go to the people who are there. Build the story from the inside out. Let the sourcing carry the argument, not just the assertion. He doesn't write from the outside in. He is writing from conversations with people who were actually in the room when things happened. Lady Colin Campbell works differently, but she has her own kind of authority. She has spent years developing detailed, sustained arguments on TV shows and online that draw millions of viewers. She uses her name, her title, her reputation in public spaces where she can be challenged directly and held accountable for her words. When she makes an argument, she stakes herself to it in a way that has real personal and professional consequences if she is wrong. That kind of accountability is what makes her different from the usual background noise of royal gossip. Between these two figures and over a best-selling book and years of documented public commentary, has been assembled a set of questions that goes far beyond the usual territory of royal gossip. It touches on something more serious: documentation, timelines, constitutional principles. And the only way to get to the bottom of why this conversation won't shut is to know exactly what those questions are. What Bower's book revealed was voluminous. Some 500 pages of documentation, reports of confrontations behind palace walls, including an alleged meeting at Kensington Palace that saw an attempt to ease family tensions apparently spiral out of control very quickly. Meghan allegedly told Prince William to take his finger off her face, while Harry stood there and did not intervene. That moment became one of the most talked about passages in the entire book. The book also delves into the financial structure of Archewell, the couple's nonprofit organization, raising questions about how money flowed through the operation, and whether the governance reflected what donors and the public had been led to believe. Meghan's Netflix deal was also directly brought up, with Bower suggesting the actual support from the platform for her projects was much less substantial than the public partnership had implied. Through it all, Bower paints a portrait of Meghan acting with an extraordinary deliberateness. His characterization is of a man who never does anything without thinking about the effect of that action, who handles relationships purely from the perspective of their utility, and who with surgical precision removes people from her circle when they are no longer useful. Her father had this one. It happened to the royal family. People who worked with her professionally have told versions of the same pattern. When the book was made public, Harry and Meghan's team responded sharply. Several claims were flatly turned down. The word conspiracy was uttered more than once. The couple's critics were depicted in terms suggesting obsession rather than legitimate inquiry. But the answer had an unexpected outcome. Rather than quashing discussion, it put a new spotlight on the book from people who hadn't been following the story closely. Suddenly, a new audience started looking up exactly what had been claimed and trying to understand why the reaction to it was so intense. And as the new audience began to read, it was the questions about the children that stopped them cold. There was one place in the public narrative of Archie's birth that didn't sit quite right in terms of details. Lady Campbell was among the first to give this observation specific, nameable terms from a serious public platform. Here's the tension at the heart. Harry and Meghan sat down with CBS News for their first big interview about the arrival of Archie after he was born. Meghan told me during that conversation that she never wanted to give birth in a hospital in the first place. She said she had planned to deliver at home. It was a throwaway line, a way of explaining the context of how things had finally panned out, but it directly contradicted the story of the Portland hospital, which had already been widely reported and accepted as the official account of where Archie had been born. The gap between the two was clear as commentators drew contrasts between the two versions. Either the home birth intention was right and the Portland hospital story needed major qualification, or the CBS interview had a statement that was not reflective of what actually happened. Both versions could not have been entirely true simultaneously without a lot of explaining that never came. In his book, Bower even pushed the timeline back further, questioning whether May 6th is indeed the correct birth date, and whether the sequence of events presented to the public is what the documented record actually shows. These are not rhetorical moves. These are requests for that basic factual clarity which should be easy to provide. Then there's a moment most missed in real time, but which went viral once royal watchers flagged it. Harry's first public appearance with Archie was when the baby was officially just 2 days old, and Harry made a comment about how extraordinary it was to watch how much babies change in 2 weeks. Not 2 days, 2 weeks. The mismatch was fleeting in the moment. Harry was in front of cameras with a newborn, clearly emotional, and it would be easy in those circumstances to say something imprecise. It is the argument made by supporters of the couple, and is a reasonable explanation to be recognized. Lady C's position is that this didn't happen in a vacuum. It was part of a pattern. A pattern that included the contradiction of the CBS interview, the questions about the date, and the way the surrounding narrative around the birth seemed to change depending on which platform and which audience it was being told to. If the questions around the birth of Archie were about inconsistencies in the narration and unexplained gaps, what arose around Lilibet's arrival involved official documents, and that changed the nature of the conversation quite a bit. Lilibet's birth is a simple and clean surface story. Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital. June 2021, healthy baby girl. That is the story that went out to the world and the whole story for much of the public. But Lady C and Bauer both looked at the details around it and found a picture that didn't quite gel as neatly as the headline implied. The taco stop detail generated the most immediate discussion. Reports circulated that Meghan was allegedly hungry during active labor and stopped to eat on the way to the hospital. This in itself might sound like some strange but not impossible anecdote. Lady C's response to it was direct and medical in its framing. Most women do not experience active labor as a mild or manageable experience. It's a physical thing. It advances rapidly, and the gap between tolerable discomfort and an urgent need can close faster than most people who haven't fully experienced it appreciate. Lady C argued plainly, the detail did not fit any reasonable understanding of what active labor actually involves. And then the void of announcements. The public was not told for 48 hours after Lilibet was born. There's a lot of speed in announcing births within the royal family, and there are dedicated media teams in place to deal with this sort of communication, so a 2-day lag is not normal. Lady C spoke directly to this, suggesting publicly that the delay was because the baby had not arrived in the traditional way when the gap started. The implication was clear and direct. It was put on record publicly before large audiences. It was never answered directly. The birth certificate itself created its own complications. One detail in particular, which got a lot of focus on royal commentary sites, was publicly highlighted by Lady C. That reading of the document revealed a state area code associated with Colorado on a certificate for a birth officially recorded as occurring in California. California and Colorado have different codes, and the difference is not a minor administrative one. If the certificate Lady C described is correctly read, the question immediately arises as to where the birth really took place and under what circumstances the document was filed. This detail went viral and was debated endlessly and has never been publicly addressed with a clear documented correction from the couple's reps. And perhaps most quietly significant of all, the medical professional publicly associated with Lilibet's birth closed her practice at the end of that same month. No explanation was given publicly. There were no comments either. She simply ceased practicing and withdrew herself from any further public involvement in the matter. Lady C called this deeply remarkable. Bauer folded it into a larger analysis of the surrounding circumstances. Neither went beyond what the documented facts showed, but both made clear they saw it as a data point that warranted serious consideration rather than silence. This conversation is not just about documents and timelines. There's another thread built around something much more immediate and visually accessible. It is about what millions watched in real time on their screens during both pregnancies and what those images looked like. Lady C used one particular word to describe what she observed about Meghan's physical presentation during the Archie pregnancy. She called it a show. That word landed straight away and divided opinion sharply. Supporters of the couple called the characterization cruel and unfounded. Critics said Lady C was talking about something that is documented in photos and video footage widely available for anyone with access to the internet to go back and check for themselves. The main thing to notice was how Meghan's bump appeared to look noticeably different from one public appearance to the next in ways that seemed like they went beyond what natural week-to-week pregnancy progression would usually produce. The most memorable thing was going to the dog shelter. At one point, Meghan, who was said to be about 8 months pregnant, went to an animal shelter, was photographed in heels, crouched down to the floor to pet dogs, and stood back up without any apparent physical assistance. Those images went around right away and divided people just like everything else in this story divides people. 8 months pregnant in heels, crouching and rising without support. Critics argued this combination would be physically extremely difficult for most women at that stage. Supporters argued that every pregnancy is different and that drawing conclusions from a photograph is inherently limited and potentially harmful. What Lady C added to this thread was the observation that not one medical professional has publicly signed off on either birth. Not for Archie, not for Lilibet. Diana's children, Beatrice, Eugenie, Catherine's 3 children. That absence is hard to explain away when you put it against every comparable royal birth in recent memory. When hospitals were confirmed, doctors were named, the public record was complete and easily available. And then there was the name, and what the name revealed. The silence. When Harry and Meghan announced that they were naming their daughter Lilibet Diana, the initial media response across the United Kingdom and the United States was almost uniformly warm. A grieving son honoring the Queen and his mother simultaneously. But Lady C looked further. Her account of the actual reaction inside the palace was the direct opposite of the warm headlines. She described cold fury, deep consternation, and a sense of violation among those closest to the Queen. Not quiet gratitude, not private warmth, but a reaction that was the emotional inverse of what was being reported publicly. The reason, Lady C explained, was the specific and deeply private nature of what that name actually was. Lilibet was not a public nickname. It was not a name the Queen had used in any official capacity or shared broadly with the world. It was intensely personal, originating in her early childhood and used across decades almost exclusively by Prince Philip. It was the name he called her throughout a marriage that spanned over 7 decades. When Philip died in April 2021, that name became something even more charged. A piece of a relationship that was gone, the most private remaining connection to the person who had known her longest. Using it required something, an acknowledgement of what it meant and who it belonged to. Whether that conversation happened has been disputed publicly. Then came the commercial dimension. Reports emerged of filings connected to the name Lilibet made around the period of the announcement. The timing raised questions that Lady C addressed directly. If the name was purely a sentimental tribute chosen from grief and love, the commercial activity running alongside it sat uncomfortably with that framing. Bauer's portrait of the couple throughout his book is of 2 people who consistently make decisions, including deeply personal ones, that align with long-term commercial positioning. The name in that reading was not separate from the strategy. It was part of it. The signal that cut through most sharply, however, came not from a commentator but from the palace itself. When William and Catherine released their public congratulations on Lilibet's birth, they referred to the baby as Lily, not Lilibet. Lily, in a formal public statement from the Prince and Princess of Wales, where every word is considered and deliberate and nothing is accidental. The choice to use a diminutive rather than the announced name was not casual editing. Lady C argued that it was a carefully measured signal, a quiet but unmistakable indication of exactly how the name had been received. The palace was not going to validate the framing Harry and Meghan had placed around it. One word, one deliberate substitution, communicating what official channels would never say aloud. What makes the name discussion significant in the context of this larger story is not the name itself. It is what the surrounding choices reveal about the pattern Bauer and Lady C have both been documenting across years of sustained name public commentary. Every decision in Bauer's framing serves a purpose. Every gesture has a calculation behind it, and beneath all of it sits a legal and constitutional argument that most people haven't fully processed. One that changes the entire nature of this debate. The royal family is not a private institution. It is a constitutional one operating under legal frameworks that extend across the United Kingdom and every Commonwealth realm that still recognizes the crown. Lady C's argument is that the circumstances surrounding the birth of children connected to the royal succession are not personal matters that fall within the ordinary right to privacy. They are matters of national governance and constitutional law, and the public has a legitimate interest in the accuracy of the records surrounding them. That framing transforms what might otherwise look like intrusive gossip about a private family into something with a different legal and constitutional character entirely. And from there, the legal silence becomes the most important element of the entire story. Harry and Meghan have demonstrated clearly and repeatedly that they are prepared to use the legal system when they believe they have been wronged. They have taken major newspapers to court. They have pursued privacy cases through extended proceedings. They have shown beyond any reasonable doubt that litigation is not a path they are afraid to walk when they feel it is necessary. Which makes the complete absence of any legal challenge to either Tom Bauer or Lady Colin Campbell over claims that go directly to the parentage of their children one of the most discussed silences in everything this debate has produced. Lady C addressed this directly. When asked about the possibility of being sued over what she has said publicly, she stated that she would not mind if they sued as long as they lost. Her reasoning was immediate and specific. Meghan, she argued, would not want to be cross-examined under oath in a courtroom, not because she has something to hide, but because a courtroom is a different environment from a spokesperson's statement. It requires documentation. It requires consistency under direct questioning. It requires the full weight of the legal process, where describing something as a conspiracy theory carries no legal standing and only verifiable facts carry any weight at all. No legal challenge has come. Neither Bauer nor Lady C has faced action over these intriguing claims that go to the heart of this debate. That silence sits alongside every other silence in this story. No named medical professionals, no settled documentation, no direct public response to questions that have moved from online speculation into mainstream commentary on both sides of the Atlantic. If the answers are simple, if the record is clean and clear and easily demonstrable, the obvious question is why the conversation keeps getting louder rather than quieter. Every book that lands at number 1, every television appearance that clips and spreads, every legal challenge that doesn't materialize, adds another layer to a silence that the couple has, for reasons of their own, chosen to maintain. The questions remain, the documentation remains unclear, and the silence around it all remains the most revealing detail of everything this story has produced.